The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian floor, its crystalline walls reaching toward a dome that showed the stars beyond. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated zones, each area climate-controlled for their specific needs. The Zephyrians floated in their methane clouds, the crystalline hive clicked and chimed in perfect harmony, and the massive Goliaths sat motionless like living mountains. At the center of this grand assembly sat Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing humanity. She was small compared to most other delegates, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the others. Her hands rested calmly on the metal briefcase beside her chair, but her dark eyes held a weariness that spoke of decades spent in these halls. The current speaker was Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony Alliance, his forearms gesturing dramatically as his translator converted his chittering into standard galactic. "The humans continue their aggressive expansion into contested space," he declared, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. "They ignore established territorial agreements and refuse to acknowledge the rightful claims of the hegemony worlds." Sarah had heard this same accusation 17 times in the past month. Each time she had patiently explained that humanity was settling uninhabited worlds, following every protocol established by the Galactic Accords. Each time, she had provided documentation, survey reports, and legal precedents. Each time, the Council had voted to table the matter for further consideration. The Nexari delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field, spoke next. "The human expansion threatens the delicate balance of this sector. Their rapid reproduction rate and aggressive terraforming techniques disrupt established ecosystems." Sarah stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. Around the chamber, various species turned their attention toward her. Some showed curiosity, others contempt, and a few displayed what might have been pity. "Honored delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Humanity has followed every law, every protocol, and every guideline established by this council. We have submitted to inspections, audits, and reviews. We have paid the taxation levies imposed upon us. We have contributed our resources, our knowledge, and our military support to council operations." She paused, letting her words settle. "In return, we have been blocked from settling worlds that have been empty for millions of years. We have been denied trade agreements that would benefit all parties. We have watched as other species are given preferential treatment for the same actions we are condemned for." Ambassador Throck of the Mammoth Confederation slammed his massive fist on his platform, causing a tremor throughout the chamber. "Humans are too young, too reckless. You have existed in space for mere centuries, while we have maintained order for millennia." "And in those millennia," Sarah replied calmly, "how many wars have been fought? How many species have gone extinct due to bureaucratic delays? How many worlds have been left barren because no one could agree on who had the right to settle them?" The ethereal collective's representative, a being of shifting mist and starlight, spoke in harmonious tones. "The human approach lacks wisdom. You seek quick solutions to complex problems. The Council's deliberative process ensures all voices are heard." Sarah opened her briefcase and removed a data pad. 5 years ago, the colony ship New Horizon was attacked by raiders while waiting for council permission to settle Kepler 442c. 300 families died because the council took 8 months to approve a settlement on a world that was already surveyed and deemed suitable. She touched the pad's screen, and holographic images appeared above her head, showing the burned wreckage of the colony ship. 2 years ago, the research station on Proxima Centauri b was destroyed by an asteroid that could have been deflected if we had been allowed to establish permanent mining operations. 47 scientists died because the council needed more time to consider the environmental impact. More images appeared: destroyed ships, failed colonies, research projects abandoned due to bureaucratic delays. The chamber fell silent as the death toll mounted in the hovering displays. Last month, Sarah continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone, the Meridian colony was massacred by the Void Hunters while waiting for council authorization to establish defensive platforms. The authorization came 3 days after the last distress signal stopped transmitting. 8,000 people died because the council couldn't decide if humans had the right to defend themselves. Ambassador Veltar chittered angrily. These incidents are regrettable, but they do not justify abandoning proper procedures. The human desire for immediate action leads to chaos. Sarah closed the datapad and returned it to her briefcase. Around the chamber, delegates shifted uncomfortably as the holographic images of destruction slowly faded. For 50 years, she said, humanity has believed in the promise of the Galactic Council. We believed that cooperation and diplomacy could create a better future for all species. We believed that following the rules would earn us respect and equal treatment. She stood and lifted the briefcase. We have been patient. We have been reasonable. We have followed every procedure, filled out every form, and submitted to every inspection. We have lost countless lives while waiting for permissions that should have been routine. The chamber's atmosphere grew tense as Sarah's tone shifted almost imperceptibly. Today, I come before you one final time with a simple request. Humanity wishes to establish colonies on 7 uninhabited worlds in the Tau Ceti system. These worlds have been surveyed, deemed suitable, and pose no threat to any existing territories. We request immediate authorization for settlement. The various delegates began murmuring among themselves in dozens of languages. The Zephyrians' methane clouds swirled faster, the crystalline hives chiming grew more discordant, and the ethereal collective's form flickered with agitation. Prime Coordinator Zal Neth, a being whose species had led the Council for over 2,000 years, spoke with the authority of eons. The human request will be reviewed according to established procedures. Environmental impact assessments must be completed, territorial surveys verified, and potential conflicts with existing claims investigated. This process typically requires 18 to 24 months. Sarah nodded once, as if she had expected this exact response. And if hostile forces attack our colonies during those 18 to 24 months, if raiders destroy our ships while we wait for permission to defend ourselves, if thousands more humans die because the Council needs time to deliberate, such incidents will be investigated according to proper protocols, Zal Neth replied dismissively. The Council's procedures exist to prevent chaos and maintain order. I see. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, but something in her posture changed. She seemed to grow larger without moving, her presence filling the vast chamber. Then humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in cacophony. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Environmental systems strained to maintain various atmospheric requirements, and several smaller species fled toward the exits. Through the chaos, Sarah's voice cut like a blade. For 50 years we tried diplomacy. We followed your rules, respected your procedures, and trusted in your wisdom. She began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet that followed her words. Starting today, humanity will defend itself by its own methods. Prime Coordinator Zal Neth's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. This is unacceptable. No species may simply withdraw from the Council. There are procedures, agreements, binding contracts. Sarah paused at the chamber's entrance and turned back. Her smile was perfectly polite, but her eyes held something that made several delegates step backward. You're absolutely right, she said. There are procedures for everything. I'm sure if you form a committee and study the matter for a few years, you'll eventually figure out how to stop us. She walked out of the chamber, leaving behind 50 years of failed diplomacy and the growing realization among the assembled delegates that humanity had just declared its independence from the galaxy's oldest and most powerful institution. Within hours, the first human colony ships would launch toward the Tau Ceti system without waiting for council approval. Within days, human defense platforms would be online around every human world. Within weeks, the galaxy would learn that some species were willing to fight for what they believed in, regardless of what the council's procedures demanded. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human action had begun. And in the cold depths of space, ancient powers that had grown comfortable behind layers of bureaucracy and procedure were about to discover why humanity had survived and thrived on the most dangerous planet in known space. The council chamber slowly emptied as delegates hurried to contact their homeworlds with news that would reshape the balance of galactic power. In the silence that followed, Prime Coordinator Zalneth stared at the empty space where humanity's representative had stood, and for the first time in 2 millennia, felt something that had been forgotten in the council's halls: fear. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 72 hours after humanity's dramatic withdrawal. The Great Chamber buzzed with tension as reports flooded in from across known space. The humans weren't just leaving the council, they were acting with a speed and coordination that caught every intelligence agency off guard. Admiral Kexhai of the Hegemony Defense Fleet stood at the central podium, his 4 arms manipulating holographic displays that showed human activity across 24 star systems. In less than 3 days, the humans have launched over 400 vessels, colony ships, construction platforms, mining operations, and military escorts are moving toward 17 different systems simultaneously. The massive displays showed streams of human ships moving through hyperspace, their trajectories calculated with mathematical precision. Unlike the typical slow, careful expansion patterns favored by other species, humanity was moving like a controlled explosion, spreading in all directions at once. Prime Coordinator Zalneth's ancient features showed strain as he studied the tactical displays. This level of coordination suggests years of planning. They were prepared for this moment long before Ambassador Chen's performance in our chamber. Performance? Ambassador Throck of the Mammoth Confederation's trunk curled with agitation. You think her speech was merely theater? I think, Zalneth replied carefully, that humanity has been testing us for decades. Every request they made, every procedure they followed, every bureaucratic delay they endured, they were gathering intelligence on our responses, our weaknesses, our inability to act decisively. The ethereal collective's representative flickered with what might have been anxiety. Our long-range sensors detect massive energy signatures around human worlds. They're constructing something on an unprecedented scale. Admiral Kexhai manipulated his controls, and the display shifted to show the Sol system. What they saw made several delegates gasp in their various respiratory methods. Around Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt, thousands of construction platforms worked in perfect synchronization. Massive orbital installations were taking shape, not the typical civilian infrastructure of a growing civilization, but military fortifications on a scale never before witnessed. Defense platforms, Admiral Kexhai reported grimly, each one equipped with weapons that exceed our own military standards. They're turning every human world into a fortress. Ambassador Veltar's compound eyes reflected the display's lights as he studied the human construction efforts. Impossible. Our intelligence network showed no signs of such preparations. The humans appeared to be focusing on civilian expansion and scientific research. Because that's what they wanted us to see, said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Every delegate turned to see a human walking toward the central area. This wasn't Ambassador Chen. This was someone none of them had seen before. The man wore a simple gray uniform with no visible rank insignia, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to absolute authority. "I am Admiral Marcus Stone, representing the newly formed Human Defense Coalition," he announced. His voice was calm, professional, and utterly without the diplomatic courtesy that had characterized Chen's decades of speeches. Prime Coordinator Zalneth's energy field pulsed with anger. "You have no authority to address this assembly? Humanity has withdrawn from the Council?" "Exactly," Stone replied, stopping in the exact spot where Chen had made her final statement. "Which means I'm not bound by your protocols, your procedures, or your permission requirements. I'm here as a courtesy to explain what happens next." Several delegates began shouting at once, but Stone simply waited, his expression unchanged. The chaos gradually died down as curiosity overcame outrage. "For 50 years, Stone continued, you watched humanity follow your rules while our people died waiting for your approvals. You assumed our compliance meant weakness. You were wrong." He gestured, and somehow, without any visible equipment, holographic displays began appearing around the chamber. They showed human military installations, fleet movements, and industrial capacity on a scale that dwarfed anything in the Council's intelligence estimates. While Ambassador Chen was filing your forms and attending your committees, humanity was preparing for the day when diplomacy would fail. "We built our fleets in the asteroid belts where your sensors couldn't reach. We developed our weapons in deep space facilities that don't appear on any of your charts. We trained our forces for scenarios your war colleges never imagined." The displays showed human ships unlike anything in the Council's databases, sleek, aggressive designs that radiated barely contained power. The technology was clearly advanced beyond current galactic standards, but more disturbing was the sheer number of vessels in the human fleet. Admiral Kexhigh's voice was strained. "Our estimates suggested humanity possessed perhaps 200 military vessels. These displays show thousands. 23,417 ships in active service," Stone corrected casually, "with production lines capable of launching 50 new vessels per day. We've been busy while you've been deliberating." The chamber fell silent, except for the various environmental systems working to maintain different atmospheric requirements. The scale of humanity's deception was becoming clear, and with it, the realization that they had completely underestimated their newest members. "Impossible," whispered the Nexari delegate. "Our intelligence networks monitor all industrial activity. Such a military buildup could not be hidden." Stone's smile was neither warm nor diplomatic. "Your intelligence networks monitor what we allow them to monitor. Every report you received about human military capacity was carefully crafted to show you exactly what we wanted you to see." The Zephyrians' methane clouds swirled faster as their translator converted their chemical communications. "The humans have been planning war since they joined the Council?" "Not war," Stone replied. "Freedom. The ability to defend ourselves without begging for permission. The right to settle uninhabited worlds without waiting for committees to debate the color of our colony ships." Prime Coordinator Zalneth activated his emergency powers, and the chamber's security systems came online. Energy barriers surrounded Stone, containment fields activated, and automated defense systems targeted the lone human. Stone looked around at the displays of force aimed at him and chuckled. "Admiral Chen warned me you might try something like this. She suggested I bring insurance." The chamber's main display suddenly activated, showing the space around the Council's orbital station. What the delegates saw made their various forms of blood run cold. The station was surrounded by human warships, hundreds of them, all with weapons trained on the station's hull. "The Human Defense Coalition has no quarrel with the Galactic Council," Stone announced, his voice carrying clearly despite the active security systems. "You are welcome to continue your debates and procedures and committees. However, humanity will no longer participate in or be bound by your decisions." The security barriers around Stone deactivated as the implications became clear. The Council Station's shields were powerful, but not against this level of concentrated firepower. More importantly, the humans had somehow approached without triggering any of the station's early warning systems. "What do you want?" Zalneth asked, his ancient authority cracking under the weight of this unprecedented situation. "Nothing from you," Stone replied. "We want you to leave us alone. Don't send fleets to force us back into compliance. Don't attempt economic sanctions or diplomatic pressure. Don't interfere with human operations in any way." He gestured again, and new displays showed human colonies already establishing themselves in the Tau Ceti system. Massive industrial platforms were under construction, defense networks were coming online, and terraforming operations were beginning, all without a single council permit or approval. "And if we refuse?" Admiral Kexhai demanded. Stone's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Around the chamber, several delegates instinctively moved away from the lone human. "Then you'll discover why humanity conquered the most dangerous planet in known space," he said quietly. "Earth taught us that the universe is hostile, unpredictable, and utterly without mercy. We learned to survive by being more dangerous than anything that threatened us." The displays changed again, showing human combat footage from their early space expansion. Battles against asteroid storms that would destroy most ships. Colonies established on worlds where the very atmosphere was poisonous. Rescue operations in conditions that would kill most species in minutes. Every human child grows up hearing stories of impossible odds and desperate victories. "We don't have your wisdom or your ancient knowledge or your careful procedures," Stone continued. "What we have is the absolute certainty that when civilization fails, when diplomacy breaks down, when the careful balance of power collapses, we'll still be here." The chamber's atmosphere grew thick with tension as delegates processed what they were seeing. Humanity hadn't just been building a military, they had been preparing for total war on a scale that most species couldn't comprehend. "The Council has maintained peace for millennia," the ethereal collective protested. "Your actions threaten the stability of the entire galaxy." "Your peace," Stone replied, "was built on the assumption that everyone would follow your rules. You never planned for what would happen when a species said no and had the power to make it stick." He turned toward the exit, but paused to address the assembly one final time. "Humanity is leaving your carefully ordered universe behind. We'll establish our own colonies, defend our own interests, and make our own decisions. You can adapt to this new reality, or you can try to force us back into compliance. Choose wisely." As Stone walked away, the human fleet outside began withdrawing with the same precision they had used to arrive. Within minutes, the Council Station was alone again, but everything had changed. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council faced a power that refused to be controlled, negotiated with, or contained. The age of unquestioned council authority was over. The age of human independence had begun. And across the galaxy, other species began to wonder if they, too, might have alternatives to endless committees and bureaucratic delays. In the depths of space, humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when diplomacy failed and a species chose destruction over submission. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the galaxy learned the true meaning of human warfare. It began with what the Council's historians would later call the Hegemony Incident, though humanity had a simpler name for it. Tuesday. Admiral Veltar commanded the largest fleet in hegemony space when he received orders to restore galactic order by forcing human compliance with Council authority. His armada consisted of 800 vessels, representing the combined military might of 12 allied species. It was, by any measure, an overwhelming force designed to crush human resistance through sheer numbers and firepower. The human response was swift and absolute. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the HMS Retribution, flagship of the Human Defense Coalition's Third Fleet. Around him, displays showed tactical information flowing from 50 different sources, human intelligence networks that had been mapping galactic military capabilities for decades, while disguised as trade missions and scientific expeditions. "Admiral Veltar's fleet has entered the Proxima Centauri system," reported his tactical officer. "They're maintaining standard council formation, heavy battleships in the center, cruisers on the flanks, support vessels trailing." Stone nodded, unsurprised by the conventional approach. Council military doctrine hadn't changed in centuries, relying on massive ships trading fire at long range while smaller vessels provided support. It was a strategy designed for battles between similar forces following similar rules. "Signal the fleet," Stone commanded. "Execute Pattern Omega." What happened next redefined space warfare for every species in the galaxy. The human fleet didn't engage at long range. Instead, they disappeared. Stealth technology that the Council didn't know existed rendered the human ships invisible to conventional sensors. When they reappeared, it was inside the hegemony formation, not around it, but literally inside it, their ships materializing between the massive Council vessels like ghosts becoming solid. Admiral Veltar's flagship, the Infinite Glory, was 4 kilometers long and heavily armored. It had survived dozens of battles and was considered invincible by hegemony standards. The human destroyer that materialized beside it was less than 800 meters long, a fraction of its size. The destroyer fired once. The Infinite Glory's reactor containment failed catastrophically, and 4 kilometers of warship became a brief star that illuminated half the system. Before the shockwave reached the nearest vessels, 17 more Council ships suffered similar fates as human vessels appeared and struck with surgical precision. "Impossible!" Veltar gasped from his flagship's emergency bridge, watching his mighty fleet disintegrating around him. "No weapons can penetrate our shields at this range." His tactical officer was frantically working his controls, trying to understand what was happening. "Sir, they're not penetrating our shields. They're ignoring them completely. Their weapons are targeting internal systems directly." The human weapons weren't like anything in the Council's databases. Instead of trying to overwhelm shields and armor, they simply bypassed them entirely. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy beams that traveled through subspace to strike targets from directions that didn't exist in normal space. Kinetic projectiles that phased through hulls before solidifying inside critical systems. But the weapons were only part of humanity's advantage. The real devastation came from their tactical doctrine. Council fleets fought like armies, organized formations advancing and retreating according to established patterns. Human fleets fought like viruses, individual units acting independently while coordinating through quantum communication networks. They struck from impossible angles, disappeared when threatened, and reappeared where least expected. Admiral Stone watched the battle unfold with clinical detachment. "Phase 2, he ordered. Suddenly, the space around Veltar's remaining ships filled with human fighters. Thousands of them, each no larger than a shuttle but moving with impossible speed and precision. They swarmed through the Council formation like angry insects, their weapons carving through armor that had been designed to withstand massive capital ship fire, not precise surgical strikes from highly maneuverable targets. "They're everywhere!" screamed the hegemony communications officer. "Our point defense systems can't track them. They're moving too fast and there are too many." Within 30 minutes, Admiral Veltar's mighty armada was reduced to burning wreckage drifting through space. Of 800 vessels, fewer than 50 remained intact, and those only because Stone had ordered them spared to carry news of humanity's capabilities back to the Council. The survivors limped back to Council space with a message that shattered the galaxy's understanding of military power. Humanity hadn't just won the battle, they had redefined what warfare meant in space, Traditional tactics, conventional weapons, and established doctrine were suddenly obsolete. But the hegemony defeat was only the beginning. Within days, human fleets appeared simultaneously in 17 different systems where Council forces had been mobilizing. Each engagement followed the same pattern: overwhelming human victory achieved through tactics and technology that rendered traditional defenses useless. The crystalline hive's geometric formations, perfected over millennia of warfare, crumbled when human ships attacked from angles that shouldn't exist. The ethereal collective's energy-based vessels found their incorporeal nature useless against weapons that targeted the quantum foundation of matter itself. The massive Goliath dreadnoughts, slow but incredibly durable, were systematically disabled by human boarding parties that somehow materialized inside their heavily shielded hulls. Prime Coordinator Zalneth convened emergency sessions day after day, watching reports of devastating defeats flood in from across Council space. The military commanders who had assured him that humanity could be easily contained were either dead or fleeing for their lives. "How is this possible?" he demanded during one particularly grim briefing. "Our intelligence suggested humanity possessed perhaps 50,000 military personnel. These engagements indicate hundreds of thousands of human soldiers operating simultaneously across the galaxy." Admiral Kexhai, one of the few senior commanders to survive the initial engagements, provided the answer that changed everything. "Because they're not just soldiers, Coordinator. Every human civilian ship we've encountered has been armed. Every human colony has military-grade defenses. Every human trade station doubles as a military base." The truth was becoming clear. Humanity hadn't built an army. They had become one. On Earth, every child learned to pilot spacecraft before they could drive ground vehicles. Every adult was trained in combat tactics alongside their civilian profession. Every human settlement was designed from the ground up to serve both civilian and military purposes. What the Council had seen as a peaceful trading civilization was actually the most militarized society in galactic history. The reports continued streaming in. Human forces had surrounded and isolated Council naval bases without firing a shot, their superior technology making resistance pointless. Human diplomatic teams, backed by overwhelming military force, were offering protection agreements to independent systems that had grown tired of Council bureaucracy. Human industrial ships were stripping abandoned Council installations of useful materials with ruthless efficiency. Most disturbing of all, other species were beginning to join them. The wolves of Fenris, a warrior culture that had chafed under Council restrictions for centuries, formally allied with humanity after watching human fleets obliterate their longtime enemies in a single engagement. The merchant princes of the Trade Confederacy, tired of Council taxation and regulation, began flying human escorts for their cargo fleets. Dozens of smaller species, inspired by humanity's successful rebellion, declared their independence from Council authority. Zalneth stood alone in his private chambers, staring out at the stars through transparent aluminum walls that had protected Council leaders for millennia. For the first time in his long life, those walls felt fragile. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. The holographic projection that appeared showed Admiral Stone, his expression as calm and professional as ever. "Prime Coordinator," Stone said without preamble. "I'm contacting you to discuss terms." "Terms?" Zalneth's voice cracked with strain. "You've destroyed half our fleet and turned a quarter of the galaxy against us." "And we can do worse," Stone replied matter-of-factly. "Much worse. This has been humanity showing restraint, Coordinator. We could have targeted Council homeworlds directly. We could have eliminated your leadership instead of your military assets. We chose not to because we're not interested in conquest or genocide. We just want to be left alone." The hologram shifted, showing tactical displays of human fleets positioned throughout Council space. The scope of their military presence was staggering. They had forces within striking distance of every major Council world. "Here are our terms," Stone continued. "The Council recognizes human independence and sovereignty over all systems currently under human control. Council forces will not approach human space without explicit permission. Council law will not apply to human citizens or human territory." Zalneth stared at the displays, seeing decades of careful galactic order dissolving before his eyes. "And in return? Humanity will not actively work to destroy the Council," Stone replied with what might have been a slight smile. "You can continue governing those species that choose to remain under your authority. We'll even maintain limited trade relationships, assuming you can meet human quality and efficiency standards." The message was clear. The Council could continue to exist, but only at humanity's sufferance. The balance of galactic power had shifted permanently. Zalneth closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 2 millennia of civilization resting on his decision. When he opened them again, his voice was steady despite the circumstances. "I will convey your terms to the full Council. I expect they will be accepted." Stone nodded once and cut the communication, leaving Zalneth alone with the wreckage of everything he had believed about civilization, diplomacy, and the natural order of the galaxy. Outside his windows, the stars remained unchanged, but everything else had been transformed by a species that had grown tired of diplomacy and chosen destruction instead, not of civilizations, but of the systems that had constrained them. Humanity had kept its promise. When diplomacy failed, they had answered with destruction. Destruction of the old order, the old assumptions, and the old certainties that had governed the galaxy for millennia. In the depths of space, human fleets maintained their vigilant patrols, ready to defend their hard-won freedom against any threat. They had learned long ago that the universe was hostile, unpredictable, and without mercy. They had simply decided to be more dangerous than anything else out there. The galaxy would never be the same.